Welcome to the Futurist Public Intellectual. On September 22nd, 2023, Apple released its iPhone 15 line of smartphones. While the iPhone 15 is substantially similar to the previous generation of iPhones, there is one massive change that could easily go unnoticed: the charging port. For over a decade, Apple used its proprietary Lightning port, while the rest of the world standardized on the USB port. The current iteration of the USB port is called USB-C. The European Union passed rules that required all smartphones and other electronic devices sold in the EU to have a USB-C charging port. Due to the market power of the EU, Apple could not merely ignore the EU and simply sell iPhones with a Lightning port. While from a technical standpoint, USB-C has surpassed the capabilities of Lightning, it begs the question of whether a government entity should be able to pick the market winners by fiat. The situation is even more fascinating when one takes into account how Apple's Lightning was superior to USB when it was introduced in 2012. Regardless, at least for now, everyone can enjoy using one charging cable for all of their new electronic devices, even if the EU could be considered rather meddlesome in a matter that could have been resolved through market forces, like the triumph of Blu-ray over HD DVD. On the other hand, the 2018 implementation of the General Data Protection Regulation, aka GDPR, was a consumer victory that was necessary for reining in the unchecked power of the tech companies. The most important digital asset is personal data, and yet for decades, the U.S. had not regulated tech companies' collection, storage, and distribution of consumer data. The U.S. government was essentially letting tech companies dictate social policy on digital data when they obviously had the profit motive to not be implementing the best consumer protections. As a consumer, being unable to access the data that tech companies were collecting on you was appallingly unacceptable. In a world where data is gold, the GDPR forced the tech companies' hand, inspiring many similar laws like the California Consumer Privacy Act. In true American fashion, the matter is being handled at the state level and not by the federal government. The latest EU tech law is the Digital Services Act, or DSA. Starting from August 25th, 2023, some of the biggest players in the online world, like Google and Facebook, have to be much more proactive about their content moderation and less invasive about their targeted advertising. The DSA is more serious than USB-C, but arguably less important than the GDPR. There is definitely a legitimate concern that the DSA might have a chilling effect on the internet because content moderation is fundamentally at odds with an online world that values free speech. For example, it's currently unclear what constitutes harassment and how that's different from simply stating that one has a problem with someone. As we can see from these three recent initiatives by the EU, tech companies have been experiencing some hard-hitting regulation for the first time in decades. While not all of it might be justified, the US's general unwillingness to regulate tech is unacceptable. With so much of our lives digitized, the tech industry should not be allowed to wield so much power. Thankfully, states like California and Colorado are stepping up to the challenge for their citizens. Thank you for listening to the Futurist Public Intellectual.